You are about to hear something that could completely change the course of your day. Subscribe to the channel, Prayer of the First Light, right now. Activate the bell and share it with someone who... There was a man named Aureliano, known in the small town where he lived as someone always in a hurry, always chasing after something that no one knew exactly what it was. He worked tirelessly, accumulating achievements that would make anyone applaud, and yet he carried within his chest a silence too heavy to be ignored. At night, he lay in an expensive bed in a luxurious room, but it was there, surrounded by everything he had once desired, that he felt poorest. Success had given him applause, but not peace. Wealth had given him comfort, but not rest. Recognition had given him fame, but not meaning. He had everything except himself. His empty heart echoed like a dark room, and the emptiness grew like an inner abyss, reminding him that winning in the world does not mean winning on the inside. Aureliano lived tired, as if he carried mountains on his back, although no one could see it. And it was there, between sleepless nights and silent tears, that he began to suspect that something essential was missing, something that no achievement could give. Aureliano couldn't explain it, but he felt his soul was ailing. The smile he showed the world was just a cracked mask, about to shatter. He tried to fill himself with travel, parties, and new goals, but each achievement tasted bitterly of empty victory. Joy arrived quickly, like fireworks, but disappeared even faster, leaving only smoke and silence. One night, looking out the window of his 34th floor apartment, he saw the city lights like fallen stars. So many, so bright, and yet so incapable of illuminating the darkness within him. For the first time, he dared to admit he wasn't living, just surviving. He felt fear because he realized he had lost control. Everything he had built was crumbling inside, and no strategy worked anymore. He wanted to run away from himself, but discovered that there is no safe distance when the enemy dwells within the mind. And then, in complete exhaustion, he murmured to the void, "If there is something beyond this, I need to find out." It was then that, without planning, he entered a small square where an elderly gentleman was silently reading a Bible. There was a peace there that Aureliano had never experienced. Not noisy, not intense, just profound. That man seemed to carry an invisible light, a rest that did not come from external achievements. Aureliano approached without knowing why, almost drawn by something greater than himself. The old man looked up and smiled as if he already knew his pain. He asked no questions. He simply opened the book and calmly read, "I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in." Philippians 4:11. Those words pierced Aureliano's soul like a silent arrow. How could someone say that? He thought. How can someone remain whole amidst chaos? The old man, noticing his astonishment, said in a serene voice, "There is a happiness that does not depend on what happens outside, but on what God builds within." And he touched his own chest, as if pointing to the place where true life begins. Aureliano was paralyzed. It seemed absurd to believe that happiness could be born from something invisible. For him, life was about control, strategy, and results. However, those words awakened an old hunger, the hunger for rest. The old man continued, "True joy is not manufactured, it is received. It is not born from what you conquer, but from those who sustain you." It was as if an invisible door opened within him. Aureliano felt an old weight begin to crack, like ice melting under the first ray of sunlight. A battle was raging inside him. One part screamed that it was foolishness, and another wept because it recognized truth in those words. For the first time in many years, he had the courage to listen to the gentler voice. And there, sitting on a simple park bench, with the night enveloping everything around him, he felt that perhaps he had found what he had sought his whole life in the wrong place. The silence seemed sacred. as if the sky itself had held its breath. In the following days, Aureliano returned to the square as one returns to his own breath. He didn't talk much, he only listened. The Bible, which had previously seemed distant and heavy, now became like water on dry land. He discovered that Paul wrote about contentment while imprisoned, chained, wronged, and yet he said he was at peace. This disconcerted him. If someone could be happy in prison, why couldn't he, with all he possessed, achieve it? It was then that he realized his emptiness wasn't a lack of achievement, it was a lack of meaning. Everything he had built had been to impress the world, but nothing had been done to heal his soul. He understood that he had lived seeking peace where it could never exist. And it was there that he wept, not from sadness but from revelation. He was ashamed of the pride that made him believe he could live alone, controlling everything. And he felt, for the first time, that perhaps true strength begins when we stop fighting alone. One rainy afternoon, sitting again before that wise man, Aureliano said with a choked voice, "I tried everything, and nothing worked." The old man replied tenderly, "Perhaps because you tried without God." And he continued, "Happiness is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of purpose. The purest gold passes through the hottest fire. The rain fell, as if washing not only the square, but also his soul. The wind seemed like a divine whisper. The old man then read another word, "The joy of the Lord is our strength." Nehemiah 8:10. At that moment, Aureliano felt something inexplicable, as if an internal storm had been calmed. It wasn't an external miracle. Nothing changed around him, but he changed inside. It was as if someone held the weight that had been crushing him for years, and for the first time, he realized that peace is not the end of war. It is God walking with you through it. As the days passed, a silent transformation took place within him. The anxiety that once would have screamed now whispered and then fell silent. The paralyzing fear lost its power. The urgency to prove something to the world disappeared like mist before the sun. Aureliano learned to breathe slowly, without the hurry to get anywhere. He began to see beauty in the little things he had previously ignored: the birdsong, the smell of rain, the silence of the morning. Life seemed to gain color, and where there had been emptiness, now there was calm. But the most impressive thing was realizing that nothing external had changed. His work was the same. His struggles continued. His challenges still existed. What changed was the invisible territory within him, and there, where there had been ruin, now there was reconstruction. He experienced the truth of something that had always seemed impossible. Peace doesn't come when everything is resolved, but when we surrender to God, what we cannot control. Some people began to notice the change and asked what had happened. Aureliano smiled simply and just said, "I stopped trying to carry what wasn't mine." He didn't talk about religion, he didn't argue, he didn't try to convince anyone. He simply lived the new peace he had received. He discovered that true transformation doesn't need to shout to be real. It just needs to exist. He learned that happiness is not a place to arrive at, but a path traveled with a rested heart. He discovered that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to continue, even without seeing. And he understood that God didn't change the storm around him. He changed the storm within him. And that made all the difference. That man who once collected external victories now collected internal miracles, and that was the kind of wealth no one could steal. Until one day, he faced a great financial loss that would have destroyed the old Aureliano. But surprisingly, his heart remained firm. He took a deep breath and said to himself, "If God is with me, I have nothing to fear." It was the first time he had faced a crisis without despair. He felt fear, yes, because feeling is human, but he was not defeated by it. It was as if his soul was anchored to something immovable, and then he understood that peace was not the result of stable circumstances, but of a faith that could no longer be shaken. Nothing external could destroy what God had built within him, and that was, for him, the greatest miracle. Because he realized he was no longer a slave to the future, his joy was firmly established in a place where no loss could reach it, and he understood deeply. True happiness does not depend on what happens around us, but on what God plants in our hearts. That night, looking again out the window of the same apartment, Aureliano realized that the city below remained the same. The lights shone as before, but now they didn't look like fallen stars, they just looked like lights. He smiled because he understood that the world didn't need to change for him to be happy. He was the one who changed. He no longer envied those who had more, nor was he ashamed of having less. He no longer chased after applause. He discovered a joy that didn't need to be seen to be real. And then he whispered, almost in prayer, "Thank you, God, for showing me that happiness is not something I achieve. It's something you place within me." And at that moment, tears streamed down his face, not of pain, but of gratitude. He knew he would never be the same again. Over time, Aureliano let go of the burden of needing to control everything. He learned to trust. He learned to rest. He discovered that surrender is not defeat, it's victory. He no longer needed to pretend to be strong all the time. He discovered that tears are not a sign of weakness, but of healing. And in this process, he found something he never imagined finding: freedom. Because when he entrusted his future to God, fear lost its voice. He finally understood that he didn't need to understand everything, just to walk. The more he walked, the lighter he felt. Like a tree that bends in the wind but doesn't break. Like a seed that dies to bloom stronger. Like someone who discovers that true strength is born from surrender. With a renewed heart, Aureliano returned to the square and found the old man again. The two embraced without words, like two travelers who recognize in each other the same road. The old man smiled and said only, "Now you understand." Aureliano replied, "I understand that happiness is not escape. It is permanence. It is not conquest. It is trust." And then, as if sealing an eternal pact, the old man opened the Bible again and read, "No one will take away your true joy." John 16:22. Aureliano closed his eyes and felt that phrase echo like a seal on his life. He knew he would never forget it, because now that joy was not a fleeting emotion, it was a firm rock. From that day on, Aureliano walked through life differently. He was no longer in a hurry. He was no longer afraid. He no longer needed to prove his worth. He discovered that he was loved by God, and that was enough. He understood that the human heart only finds rest when it finds its origin, and he discovered that true peace does not depend on what we have, but on who we have within us. He became someone light, so light that he seemed to carry a piece of heaven within him, and everyone who crossed his path noticed this. Not because he spoke beautifully, but because his life shone like a lit candle in the dark. And then, on a silent night, sitting again in the square, looking at the infinite sky, Aureliano said something that seemed to summarize his entire process. "I don't need everything to go right to be happy. I only need God." And at that moment, he felt his soul rest as never before. He was no longer a prisoner of fear, comparison, or control. Finally, he was free. He understood deeply that happiness is not a feeling, it is conviction. It is not a moment, it is foundation. It is not conquest, it is the present. And with his heart full of this certainty, he smiled with a peace that no storm could steal. His life was never the same again, because now he knew the secret that the whole world tries to discover. True happiness is born when God dwells within us. And if someone asked him how he discovered this truth, Aureliano would answer with the same phrase that transformed his story. I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. Philippians 4:11. There's a secret to happiness that the whole world tries to discover, but few truly manage to live. People chase after success, applause, status, and achievements as if happiness were hidden behind each new conquest. They work to exhaustion, buy everything money allows, accumulate followers, collect external victories, but inside they remain empty. Because pleasure is momentary, it arrives quickly, but leaves even faster. True happiness, however, remains when everything else is gone, withstands the storm, sustains the heart when everything seems to collapse. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It's born within the soul and can only come from God. Whoever discovers this stops living tired and begins to live fully, because true peace doesn't come from the outside in, it comes from the inside out. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. Many believe that happiness is having a perfect life, where nothing hurts, nothing is lacking, and nothing goes wrong. But the truth is that difficult moments don't steal true joy. They only reveal where it was built. If our peace depends on what we can control, we will always live in fear. If it depends on what might end, we will always live in insecurity. But when our joy is in God, nothing external can extinguish what He has placed within us. Paul wrote these words not from a palace, not from a golden throne, but from a cold and unjust prison. And yet he said, I am at peace. Not even chains can bind a soul that rests in God. Happiness is not the absence of struggles, but the presence of purpose. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. There are people with everything that can be bought, and yet they plead for peace. And others who have nothing, but carry within their hearts a light that nothing can extinguish, because heaven is not measured by possessions, and joy is not measured by achievements. True happiness does not depend on results. It depends on relationship, a relationship with the Father who sustains, heals, and strengthens us. The smile that comes from God does not disappear when doors close. It grows in the darkness. Whoever relies on the joy that the world gives crumbles, but whoever relies on the joy that God gives remains. Happiness is not something found outside. It is something that is born when God dwells within. And when He enters, all emptiness is transformed into fullness. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. Sometimes we believe we will be happy when we finally have that answer, that healing, that job, that resolved relationship. But what we don't realize is that this thought puts us in an invisible prison, because there will always be something missing. There will always be a new worry. There will always be a new challenge. When we condition our peace on tomorrow, we lose the beauty and strength of today. God doesn't promise a life without storms. He promises presence within them. True happiness flourishes when we learn to trust even without understanding, to rest even without seeing a way out, to smile even in the midst of war. Whoever discovers this lives lightly, because they don't fight alone. Happiness is not born when everything improves. It is born when the heart learns to rest. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. There is a silent war within us, the battle between what we feel and what we believe. Fear screams, anxiety suffocates, pain tries to convince us that we will never be happy. But faith whispers in the midst of chaos, hold on tight, it's not over yet. Happiness is not ignoring pain, but learning to go through it with hope. When we stop fighting with our own strength and surrender our burdens to the Lord, something supernatural happens. The weight falls and peace grows. Jesus doesn't just calm external storms, he calms the storm within us. When the heart learns to depend on God, it rests even when the feet still walk through darkness. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. If you could see what God is preparing, you would understand why certain doors were closed, why some people had to leave, and why certain processes were so painful. There are pains that are not punishment, but construction. While the world tries to escape pain, God uses it as a tool for growth. The purest gold passes through the hottest fire. The seed needs to be buried before it blooms. So it is with happiness. Often it is born after the darkest nights, and when it is born, no one can stop its brilliance. God transforms tears into strength, desert into garden, and silence into testimony. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. There is no victory without struggle, and there is no true happiness without surrender. Surrender is not giving up. It is recognizing that we cannot continue alone. The control we try to hold on to so tightly is precisely what tires us the most. When we surrender everything to God, we discover that He always knows what He is doing. Happiness is not having all the answers, but trusting in the one who possesses them. Peace does not come from explanation, it comes from presence. When we understand this, we stop living in a rush and begin to live trusting. Happiness is resting in the Father's arms and knowing that we are safe, even when we don't understand the way. I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. Philippians 4:11. The world tries to convince us that joy lies in having more, but heaven teaches us that happiness lies in depending less. Less weight, less fear, less haste, less pride. Those who live trying to impress the world lose themselves in the process. Those who try to carry everything alone crumble, but those who learn to lean on God become unshakable. True happiness is not the fruit of external achievements, but of a soul that has found its rest in the Creator. When we understand that God is sufficient, we lack nothing more. And the heart that has discovered this is a free heart. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. There are people who reach the top of the world and still feel an emptiness that nothing fills, and there are simple, unknown people without riches, but full of a light that no one can explain, because happiness is not in what you possess, but in who you possess. The presence of God transforms the simplest piece of land into a territory of peace. He enters where it hurts, cleanses where it bleeds, heals where no one sees. He doesn't need to change your circumstances to change your life. He changes you from the inside, and that changes everything around you. A healed heart sees life with different eyes. No one will be able to take away your true joy. John 16:22. People try to fill the void with distractions, parties, shopping, relationships, addictions, speed. But none of that silences the soul, because what's missing isn't something, it's someone. Only God fills the space that was created for Him. Everything we try to use as a substitute only increases the hole inside. True happiness isn't in excess, it's in essence. It's not in conquering the world, but in finding rest in the Father's heart. When He occupies the center of life, everything finds its right place, and the soul learns to breathe again. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. You don't need to wait until everything is resolved to be happy. True happiness begins now, in the middle of the process, while God is still building what you asked for in prayer. To be happy is to choose to give thanks while waiting, to trust while suffering, to persevere while crying. Happiness isn't born after victory, it's the force that leads you to it. Those who learn to find joy during the journey receive miracles without even realizing it, because peace is not the absence of struggle, it is the presence of purpose. And when there is purpose, nothing is in vain. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8-10. How often do we believe that our lives will only be complete when we reach the next step, but the horizon never arrives. When we achieve one thing, we want another. When we get what we ask for, we're already thinking about the next dream. And so we live always running, always tired, always afraid of losing. But God invites us to live differently, to live in the present, to live fully, to live gratefully. He calls us to rest in today, because true happiness is not in the future we imagine, it is in the God who walks with us now. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. There are moments when everything seems to collapse at once. The heart aches, hope weakens, and the mind screams that we will not endure. But it is on these days that God whispers to our spirit, I am still here. True happiness isn't built when life is perfect, but when we discover that God's presence is enough to sustain what we cannot bear. He doesn't allow storms to destroy us, but to reveal a strength we would never perceive without them. Those who learn to trust in the midst of pain find a peace that the world can never explain, because even without answers, the soul rests when it knows in whom it is supported. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. The joy that comes from God doesn't depend on life's climate. It remains when the body is tired, when the mind is overwhelmed, when the heart is wounded. Some people smile on the outside but bleed on the inside. Others cry on the outside but shine on the inside because they have been filled with a love that never fades. Spiritual happiness is born when we understand that we are not alone, that there is a purpose in every step, that there is divine care in every detail. The joy that God gives does not tremble before fear, does not collapse before loss, does not surrender to chaos. She is renewed strength with each sunrise. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. The world can take many things from us, opportunities, people, stability, security, but it can never take what God has placed within us. When the heart finds its source of joy in the Lord, it no longer depends on applause, recognition, or approval. The silence of others does not steal the brilliance of those who have found true peace. When God fills a life, it is not emptied by losses. Even when everything around changes, what He has built remains. True happiness is indestructible because it is kept in a place where human hands cannot reach, and whoever finds it is never the same again. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. There are people who wait their whole lives to be happy because they believe happiness is a final destination. But happiness is a daily journey. It is waking up and giving thanks, even when it hurts. It is taking a deep breath and believing that God is doing something even when we see nothing. It is learning to look beyond what the eyes can see and trusting in the invisible. Happiness is walking by faith, not by sight. It's about deciding that what I carry within me is greater than what happens outside of me. Those who understand this live differently, with more lightness, more gratitude, and more purpose, because they know that God is guiding every step. I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. There is no truly happy heart when it is full of comparisons. The secret to peace is to stop looking at the lives of others and begin to see God's grace in one's own journey. Each person has their own time, their own rhythm, their own calling. When we try to live what wasn't meant for us, we lose direction and become sick inside. But when we surrender our future into the hands of the Creator, we find rest, because we know that He never makes mistakes in timing. God's clock is never late and never early. It always arrives exactly at the right time. And those who trust live without haste and without fear. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. True happiness grows when we stop trying to control everything. Control is an illusion that only leads to exhaustion. When we try to take God's place, we carry burdens we weren't made to carry. But when we surrender everything into His hands, we discover that being weak isn't failing. It's allowing God to be strong in us. He doesn't want us to live burdened. He calls us to rest, and when we rest, peace flourishes. No storm is too great for the one who commands winds and seas. No tear is wasted in His hands. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. God didn't create us to survive. He created us to live life to the fullest. We weren't made to collect fear, but to carry faith. We weren't created to live as slaves to pain, but as children who trust in the Father. When we understand who we are, we discover that happiness isn't something we need to conquer. It's something we can receive. True joy begins when we know we are loved even when we don't deserve it, forgiven even with our flaws, and cared for even when we don't ask. God's love isn't a feeling. It is a rock that sustains. I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. Philippians 4:11. The happiness that God gives is not lost in life's changes. It remains when doors close, when opportunities disappear, when dreams seem to die. Because God never closes a door without preparing another, better one. Sometimes He protects us by taking away something that seemed essential, but that would destroy us later. True happiness is born when we understand that everything God takes away, He takes away out of love, and everything He delays for a purpose. Whoever trusts in God's will lives without fear of tomorrow, because they know that the author of history has already seen the end. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Nothing is more dangerous than seeking happiness in the wrong place. When we place our joy in fleeting things, we will inevitably suffer frustration. But when we place our happiness in something eternal, it remains. God's presence teaches us to live without fear of loss, because what He gives does not end. He does not change with time, does not fail with circumstances, does not abandon us when everyone leaves. He is peace in the midst of chaos, a voice in the midst of silence, a refuge in the midst of the desert. He is all we need. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:22. Some of life's greatest victories don't happen when everything goes right, but when we decide to stand firm even when everything goes wrong. Happiness is not the end of the war, but the strength we receive while we fight. When we recognize that our battles are not greater than our God, hope is reborn. He doesn't abandon us in the valley. He walks with us through it. And when we come out on the other side, we come out stronger, wiser, and more prepared. No tear is without purpose. No process is meaningless. God transforms pain into destiny. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. Philippians 4:11. There are stories that can only be written in silence, when no one sees, when the ground disappears and all that remains is trust. It is in this invisible territory that God builds true happiness. When we are down, He teaches us humility. When we are broken, He teaches us dependence. When we lose, He teaches us meaning. True happiness doesn't come from the absence of falls, but from the certainty that there will always be a hand lifting us up. And when we look back, we realize that the most difficult phases were precisely those that brought us closest to the Father. Because it is in the desert that we learn to recognize His voice. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Life is full of seasons. There are days of flowers and days of thorns, days of victory and days of struggle, days of celebration and days of silence. But true happiness is not built on external seasons, but on the faith we carry internally. If our joy depends on circumstances, it dies with them. But if it depends on God, it flourishes even when everything seems barren. Whoever understands this does not despair when night falls, because they know that morning will come. Spiritual happiness is the courage to continue believing even when the body is tired and the soul wounded. No one can take away your true joy. John 16:2, Lord, teach us to find happiness not in circumstances but in you. Heal what hurts, calm what cries out, silence what weighs us down. Pour out your peace upon our minds, your strength upon our spirits, and your joy upon our souls. May we live free from fear, comparisons, and the need to control everything. May true happiness flourish within us, regardless of what happens outside. May your presence be our refuge and our eternal joy. In Jesus' name, amen. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Nehemiah 8:10.